thinking differently, talking differently. Many of the terms people use and the discussions they have on a daily basis are based upon the assumption that authority can exist. By constantly hearing and repeating the superstition based dogma, nearly everyone unwittingly reinforces the myth in their own minds and in the minds of those they talk to. Authoritarian propaganda is so ubiquitous that it does not feel to the masses like a message at all. It just feels like talking about what is. Most of every history book is about who ruled what era when, which authoritarian regime conquered another authoritarian regime, which individuals or political parties came to power, which forms of government and types of public policy various empires have had, and so on. They speak about elections, who wield who wielded the power behind the scenes, what laws are passed, what taxes were imposed, and what the people thought about their leaders. The underlying premise, which comes through loud and clear, even if it is never openly stated, is that it is both inevitable and legitimate for there to be some ruling class variety of overlord with the right to forcibly control everyone else. That message continues to be a constant underlying theme of nearly everything written in the newspapers or broadcast on the radio or television. The news reports, whether local or national, talk about what legislation the representatives or congressmen have passed, what law enforcers did that day, which candidates are running for public office, which public policies they support, and so on. The way every bit of it is reported is heavily tainted by the superstition of authority. Of course, the way people think affects the way they talk, and each person is constantly expressing his views on his fundamental beliefs, even in seemingly trivial discussions. Compare how the same exact situation and events would likely be reported first by one who believes in authority, then by one who does not, with the superstition. Today, the local government of Springfield put into place a 4% increase on local building permit fees, the proceeds of which are intended to fund a program to provide certain medical assistance for the elderly, without the superstition. Today, a group of local extortionists issued a formal threat to anyone doing construction or renovation in Springfield, demanding 4% more than the group had previously demanded from such people. The thieves say they intend to give some of the money they seize to the elderly. When someone escapes the superstition of authority, his thought patterns and therefore his speech patterns change dramatically. He does not use euphemistic terms which assign legitimacy to legal violence. He describes tax collectors as what they actually are: professional extortionists. He describes law enforcers as what they actually are: the politicians' hired thugs. He describes laws as what they actually are: threats from politicians. He does not proudly describe himself as a law abiding taxpayer because he recognizes what the term actually means: one who allows himself to be robbed and controlled by power hungry megalomaniacs. Most statists have a hard time imagining a world in which there is no centralized machine attempting to control everyone else. However, some find it equally difficult imagining a world in which they themselves are not being forcibly controlled. The thought of looking out at the world and feeling beholden to no one, feeling no obligation to obey the laws of others, is utterly foreign to anything they have ever contemplated. As sad as it is, many people find it very hard to imagine a world in which there is no one they must bow to, no legislature they must subjugate themselves to, no law or rule that can ever outrank their own consciences. Such ideas are worlds away from what nearly everyone has been taught to believe, and accepting such a drastically different view of reality feels like a profound existential awakening. He who has escaped the myth says to himself something like this: does any person or group have the right to demand payment from me for something I did not ask for and do not want to fund? Of course not. If I'm not committing aggression against anyone via force or fraud, does anyone have the right to force me to make the choices they wish I would make? Of course not. Do I have the right to resist such aggression? Of course I do. Does any person or group of people possess any rights that I do not possess? Of course not. How and from where would they have gotten such rights? Do I, at any time or in any place, under any circumstances, ever have an obligation to do anything other than what my own conscience dictates? Is there any situation in which the decrees or laws of any supposed authority could ever obligate me in any way and to any degree to abandon my free will or ignore my own sense of right and wrong? Of course not.